So you've probably heard about a heavy metal detox, right? Is it just some wellness trend or is it a serious life-saving medical treatment? Well, here's the fascinating thing. It's actually both. Today, we're going to unpack the two very different worlds of chelation therapy. We've got the established science on one side and the controversial frontier on the other. Okay, let's get into it.
First things first, what even is chelation? Honestly, the name itself gives you the perfect picture. It comes from the Greek word chelos, which means claw. And that is exactly what a chelating agent does. It's this organic molecule that goes hunting for a toxic metal ion in your body, grabs onto it like a claw, and wraps it up in a way that your body can then safely get rid of it. It's a pretty brilliant detoxification process when you think about it.
So when does this claw action become an actual medical therapy? Well, it's all about dealing with toxic levels of heavy metals, the kind of stuff our bodies have absolutely no use for and really have a tough time getting rid of on their own.
This slide really shows us what's at stake. And what's important here is that these are not just some made-up numbers. These are the specific thresholds based on actual medical policies where heavy metals are officially considered toxic. Look at lead for a child. A blood level over 45 micrograms per deciliter. That's the specific trigger where doctors start seriously considering chelation. It's the point where the body is officially poisoned and needs help. Okay, so this brings us to the first reality of chelation therapy. This is the part that is universally accepted, backed by regulators, and, yep, even covered by insurance. This is where the science is considered totally settled.
When we talk about these approved uses, we're really talking about the official standard of care. This is the viewpoint from major medical and insurance bodies that have drawn a very clear line in the sand about when this therapy is absolutely necessary and when it's not.
So the takeaway here is that chelation is the go-to #1 treatment for clear-cut cases of poisoning. You know, things like lead, mercury, or arsenic. It's also absolutely critical for certain genetic disorders like Wilson's disease, where the body just can't handle copper correctly, or for patients who need so many blood transfusions they end up with a dangerous overload of iron. In these situations, chelation isn't just helpful, it is an undisputed, life-saving intervention.
And this is definitely not some new age fad. I mean, just look at this timeline of FDA approvals. We are talking about a therapy that's been officially in use since 1953. That's when EDTA was first approved for lead poisoning. The science for these specific life-threatening conditions has been developing and getting refined for over 70 years.
But, and this is a big but, the moment we step outside of those very specific acute conditions, we walk into a completely different world. This is the investigational frontier. It's where the science gets debated, the evidence is messy, and where the real controversy kicks off.
And this slide right here really gets to the heart of the whole debate. On the left, you've got the standard of care we just talked about. But on the right, a whole list of chronic conditions where some doctors are using chelation. The core idea here is that maybe, just maybe, long-term low-level exposure to metals contributes to diseases like atherosclerosis by creating inflammation and stress in the body. The huge controversy is that this idea is way less understood than acute poisoning, and that's led to a ton of skepticism from the mainstream medical world.
For a long time, the answer from that mainstream world was a hard no, especially when it came to heart disease. This 2002 Cochrane review was incredibly powerful. It sifted through all the studies and basically said, look, there's just not enough good evidence here. And for many doctors and researchers, that was the final word on the topic for years.
But you know how it is, science doesn't just stand still. That conclusion from 2002, it was eventually challenged by a massive study, sponsored by none other than the U.S. National Institutes of Health. It was called the Trial to Assess Chelation Therapy, or TACT for short.
And we're not talking about a small trial here, not at all. The TACT study involved more than 1,700 patients, all of whom had previously had a heart attack. The whole point was to finally, rigorously test this idea of using chelation for heart disease.
And the results, they were pretty surprising. The study found that the patients who got the EDTA chelation therapy had an 18% lower risk of what's called a primary outcome. That's things like death, heart attack, or stroke, compared to the group that got a placebo. Now, an 18% reduction, that's definitely a significant finding.
But hang on, because here's where it got even more interesting. When they looked at just the subgroup of patients who also had diabetes, that risk reduction jumped to a jaw-dropping 39%. A finding that strong really suggested that for this specific group of people, the benefit could be huge.
And the debate isn't just about heart disease either.
Other research is pointing to potential benefits in other areas too. Some studies have shown that chelation can slow down or even reverse kidney problems in patients who have a high body burden of lead. And another trial found that for some kids with autism, improvements in their symptoms were directly linked to the amount of toxic metals they got rid of after DMSA therapy.
Okay, so where does all of this leave us? It feels like we have two realities existing at the same time, right? On one hand, chelation is a clear, established, life-saving treatment. And on the other, it's this emerging, super controversial, but maybe powerful tool for chronic disease. So how do you even begin to navigate that?
So, the clinicians who are working on the investigational side of this, they tend to use a much more holistic approach. It is not just about giving a drug. Step one is always to find and get rid of the source of the toxic exposure. Step two is to support the body with good nutrition, making sure to replace essential minerals. And only then, as a third step, do they use therapies like chelation to help the body clear out what's already built up inside.
And that brings us right back to the central question. On one side, you have these clear, life-saving uses for acute poisoning. On the other, you have this really compelling but still debated evidence, like the TACT trial, hinting at a role in chronic illness. So what is it? Is chelation an underused tool that could help us tackle some of our biggest modern health problems? Or is it a therapy where the risks still outweigh the benefits for these unproven uses? The scientific community is still wrestling with that very question, and the answer, whatever it is going to shape the future of medicine.